Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast with me, Joshua Jackson. As regular listeners will know, this podcast is all about hearing from authentic leaders across the country, gaining an understanding of the mindsets of the people that get up each day and make this country work. Today, I'm speaking with Katy Tuncer, the founder of Horizon37, an expert in leadership coaching, an expert in all things to do with leadership. So it should be a really interesting conversation. Katy, thanks for coming on and speaking with me today. And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a bit of background about yourself and what you do and why you do it.
Hello, Josh. Thanks for having me on the show. Let's talk leadership. So what do I do? I transform the leadership of innovation businesses so they can lead their scale-ups. In terms of my background, lots of leadership myself. So my own leadership journey covers from rather traditional roles, being a British Army officer, being head of performance planning and risk at the Met Police, to McKinsey. So it's a global management consultancy where I worked in energy, consumer goods, healthcare, specialised in organisational performance. Then got a bit more creative. McKinsey spin out, which I founded and exited, which was the sports sector specialists, including like London 2012 Olympic commercial strategy and things like that. My leadership career has also taken me around the world. So, for example, working with Oxfam in Senegal, working with Ministry of Health in Bahrain, for example, and Ministry of Sport in Saudi, all sorts of things, and lots of community programs as well. So less in the professional side, but I've also founded some community movements like Leadership in Motherhood, which is around mothers helping to create an identity and empowering identity as leaders as well as mothers, and something called Ready Steady Mums, which is all about community connection and physical activity for new mothers, again to empower them to step into their full potential as leaders. More latterly, my career has been more about startups, innovation myself. So, you name it, from fitness DVDs, a virtual personal trainer, a conception assistance device. I've even done a crowdfund, one of the first that was done in 2012. That one actually failed. Maybe we'll talk about that later. So lots of success and failure that has led me on this journey now to where I am. I'm always going to be a creative inventor, and founding Horizon37 was a way to realise my full passion in supporting brilliant leaders to step up and scale their innovation businesses.
Well, it's so much variety there, and we're talking everything from sort of base level around the community where people are just building connections and all the way up to sort of high pressure, high stress situations, especially your work within the army and within the police. Do you find that actually those leadership styles need to be different, or do you think that there's actually sort of similarities and continuation regardless of where you're at and what level you are?
I think there's huge diversity in leadership, not just, and it's healthy to have huge diversity in leadership and not just one person to be a certain way, but to be able to adapt in the different circumstances that you're in. I've certainly had to deploy different techniques to win trust and credibility in the military than I would in working in an institution that's related with health or in a startup where I'm trying to create a vision and align people. That's my personal experience. And I suppose the older I get, the more comfortable I am with those winding turns. I think in the olden days, you'd get the advice, wouldn't you? Well, you can't have a fragmented career pathway like that. What's the coherent story? Actually, I've made total peace with that, and I think the leader that I am today is a benefit from experimenting with a lot of different ways, methods, ways of being, behaviours, techniques in leadership. I've been a coach for 10 years actually now, and even that. I'm grappling with a better description, might be a catalyst or a transformer or something. There's so many different ways of being effective as a human and being effective as a leader.
Well, that's it's really interesting to be hearing actually that you are taking different styles and different ways of doing things, and because different such situations do need a different style of leader. I think that's what you are doing with Horizon37. I was looking into some of your research pieces that you've done as a bit of prep for this conversation.
Oh, well
And
done.
and obviously looking at Horizon 37, starting with the company that you're running, a lot of it is about preparing people for moving that startup into its next phase,
Yeah.
understanding the differences between founders and CEOs, understanding the different skill sets that are needed, surrounding yourself with a board of people that can complement you, but also identifying those that are, as I think in your terms, you put the villains of it. So, can you explain a little bit more about what that sort of work does and what that means for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's you've spotted a really important thing there. There's no one size fits all. There's no one way of leading, and there's no one way of scaling a business. And it case by case, you need to work out what's necessary, what are the essential mission critical components to get right. And a lot of our work at Horizon 37 is helping companies to work that out. You can't do it all. If you say you were in a conventional organization, and you could go, okay, I'm going to go up the career ladder, I'm going to become a comprehensively great rounded leader, right? That's maybe realistic in certain scenarios. But if you're leading a scale up, you see everything at pace. Your circumstances are not the same as anybody else's. And of the thousands of things you could do, you got to choose what your way of doing it is, and what are the handful of things that are going to make the difference, that achieves the business outcome. And we're often talking kind of weeks and months on time scale. They don't have years and years and years to get this right. So really being a bit more open to different ways of doing it. Maybe it's worth me talking about what we mean by leadership. Actually, we have a definition we work to, which is purposely not formulaic, right? So, and I'll compare it to another definition from a former part of my career.
Please
So
do.
the definition we work with is generating positive results through others. And every word in that definition is really essential, right? It's not doing. Most of the people who are leading innovation businesses are very good at doing. That's got them success so far. It's then the through others bit is essential. That's what leading is. And it's generating. So generating can be done in many different ways, not just the old-fashioned directing. Also, it doesn't say anything about the particular style or technique. You can choose the right one. The definition of leadership is purposely about the outcome that you achieve. And I love to compare that to, and I won't say where, but previous stage in my career, a very prominent definition of leadership is he who has the will to dominate over his fellow men. That is a definition from, I'm ashamed to say, the 1990s. It's not ancient history. I think we've moved on a long way and really getting much better at understanding that there's a huge diversity of leadership that's needed, specific to the situation, the circumstances, and the people involved at the time.
I was going to say that does sound like a very antiquated viewpoint, very antiquated definition there, the asserting dominance element. But no, that's really interesting that you've
It
taken
works
those two
sometimes, right?
together.
I'm not saying that's never the right way to do it. It's
No,
just not the only way, right?
absolutely no. There is a difference now, and you're right. There are so many different situations there, and that's interesting for us place to start. Really, actually talking about that leadership definition. But I within your work at Horizon 37, you're obviously working with so many different leaders, so many at different stages in their journey. And another part that I found really interesting about your work was about some of the pressures that leaders face. And I believe there were four key components that you were looking at, and these are on the research side non-linear, but obviously for the pressures being setting direction, creating a company culture, managing your team's performance, and then what I found to be really important is both the receiving and the giving of feedback. Can you let us know why those four and what that means for leaders that are trying to develop and grow?
So you're referring to the research that we did at Horizon 37 with Cranfield last year, and that identified those four mission critical components that rise to the top as enablers of business outcomes in scale up. They're not the only four. There are 14 more that we call the tail components. But this was about correlation, right? So observation that these four components correlate with business success. Now, why that is, I can speculate. It seems to become really essential when you get to a headcount of around 40, and things start to happen then that you can't count on bilateral conversations to build alignment. You can't just all be nice to each other anymore because you're good mates and you like each other and you trust each other. You need to have some more robust and difficult conversations at times. And it's just something about the human dynamic when an organization gets to that size that means that those 4 things seem to become so essential. It's also not okay just to do those 4 things. You also have to proliferate the leadership across a set of leaders. And we talk about creating a business full of leaders, not just the one who gets the 4 things right and then it's like job done. So it's also about, it's a team effort, right? Don't do it alone.
Absolutely. And let's say you were going to go into a company and asked you to assess their leadership. Is there a particular way you'd be doing that? Are there some key components that you'd be looking for and that you'd be putting, let's say, good and bad columns together, or pros and cons, or doing a SWOT analysis?
Yeah, I mean, all of those techniques are useful. The key thing is to do it in partnership with them and not at them. So we work with leadership teams we gather insight for them and with them. So it's very important to get the opinion of the board, to get the executive team themselves to understand how they feel their current state and needs of leadership is going now. It's also important to talk to the staff, and then we are probably a bit more structured, looking at the 18 components I mentioned earlier, and to also observe them in action. And we put all that together to create a picture of what the step ups will be that will make the biggest difference to them. We do a huge amount of deprioritization. So we work with the leadership teams on, okay, can you get away with this? Is this good enough? Let's just not do that. There's just not the luxury to do things comprehensively and perfectly. It's just got to be fast and dynamic. So we then deprioritize to select the step ups that will make the big difference, and then work on those. It sounds quite simple, really, doesn't it, when I put it like that?
It does sound very simple, but I can imagine it's anything but, and especially the messaging.
Each company will have a different set of priorities. That's the thing. We never see the same thing again. There's some common themes where which will come up, but we'll never have the same set of, these are the from to step ups that you need. They're exactly the same company by company. And that's the key. That's what makes it exciting working in the innovation sector. There's these kind of leaders. They have a lot of gaps, and they know they have a lot of gaps. They don't need to fill them all. When they do fill them, they do it so fast. It's they're brilliant people. They've been able to create these great innovations, working with them to focus and make the step ups in the right way.
So from my side then, another interesting area that you've been working on and wanting to talk about is managing yourself, looking at your own productivity, but also keeping your morale up and overcoming some confidence slumps. And there are so many different techniques that people talk about to improve yourself there or improve those around you. Is that something that you think is a priority?
In my experience, managing yourself all starts with mindsets. So we've done a huge amount of research and experimentation in how to work with leaders to create empowering mindsets. We've written a Mighty Mindsets manual, it's called, which is very popular. And it comes down to 3 things that you need to get right first and foremost. It doesn't matter what raft of techniques and methods you have if your mindsets are not empowering. The first is about how you see your circumstances. Do you see yourself as in an empowering context where you are creating purpose, you're choosing what will happen, you have a sense of agency, even within your circle of control? It doesn't need to be everything. So that's the first mindset to work on. The second one is to look at how you relate with yourself. So do you have an empowering identity for yourself, which is convincing for yourself and others that your strengths and your contribution will achieve the kind of results that matter to you? And how you relate to yourself is essential. And then the third mindset, we call this Mighty Mindset number 3, and it's like magic, is are you relating with those around you in a way where your perception of them is empowering for you and eliciting your own best performance? So Josh, say I was to go, I'm about to do a podcast with this guy, Josh, I don't think he really knows what he's talking about, and he's probably going to be really aggressive. My own performance will be rubbish. Whereas if I come onto a podcast thinking, Josh is a real expert in leadership, he's going to ask me such insightful questions, and he's going to make sure that we do a fantastic job for our audience, my own performance will be better. Doesn't matter what you actually do, it's the way I think about you, which is what impacts that. And working on mindsets is the underpinning for everything in our experience. You can then, when you've got your mindsets great, you can achieve all sorts of things with great methods around communication and strategy and performance management and decision making and problem solving and everything else. But it starts with mindsets.
That's really interesting. Having your internal mindset reflecting your external persona.
Yeah, also starting with a healthy way of thinking about things. I mean, that's been so neglected in the past. You think about in the past, people will be saying, well, I said this to the person, and it's like, well, you basically vomited the words at the person. That is not. You're not going to be effective because you're not thinking about it in an empowering way, and all your behaviors naturally follow the way you think. So absolutely, I think this is the way leaders are becoming more and more aware of the power of the way they think and their mindsets.
And I can imagine that has a huge effect on your team as well. If you are projecting a level of confidence or projecting a level of serenity, even if internally you might not be feeling that confident or that strong, but it makes sure that their morale is raised as well, that they're feeling better about the way that they're working and the direction that they're going in.
So true. I mean, leaders are role models, like it or not. We all follow role models. It's the easiest cognitive shortcut to go, well, what's the leader doing? I'll just copy that. And it happens. It's a human behavior that we can't really avoid it. So we might as well be good role models. So absolutely. You made me think of another thing then, which is, if leadership is generating positive results through others, the real Uber leadership is generating leaders to actually create leaders. I was talking to a CEO this morning that we're working with on a program, and I said, I'm going on this podcast today. What shall I say? And he went, well, I can tell you that the biggest impact that Horizon 37 has had on us is that we as an executive team now create other leaders. I said, tell me more. He says, well, they think, how are we going to cross the river, not how are we going to build the bridge? And I thought that was a lovely way of thinking about it. If you can proliferate leadership by generating other leaders, then you are super Uber leader.
That is I think the tidbit here so far, the how to cross the river rather than build the bridge. Just having that very simple mindset change that can do so many wonders for productivity, for morale, for internal confidence, for everything really.
We move well beyond delegation, and instead we're causing empowerment, ownership, responsibility throughout businesses. It's magic.
Well, that does then lead me on to an extra thought as well. It's just the very opposite of the times where you, let's say, have to bring everybody with you, but the times where you yourself, as the leader, have to stamp down or have those difficult conversations, shall we say. And, how do you have any tips or ideas around that?
Which particular difficult conversations? You mean firing people?
I mean, bringing... How to put this? I don't want to say firing people. I don't want to say making people redundant, because they're not the only difficult conversations. Sometimes it's being the strong-willed character that is going to make a decision, that is going to be the one that, regardless of those around you, maybe potentially disagreeing with you, you're still going to override them.
CEOs often get this really conflicting feedback. So on the one hand, they're being told we all want autonomy, we want to make our own decisions, we want to have freedom. And then on the other hand, and sometimes by the same people on the same day, they're like, can you just make a decision and give us some clear and ambiguous direction? And that is a constant challenge for leaders to get right. They need to be seeing the best in people, being open, being empowering, but having a level of conviction in your own decision, whether that's right or wrong, because sometimes you don't have enough information to be sure the decision is right, but a timely decision is better than no decision. That side of it is also really essential. And then treating the people that you're talking with huge respect, and expecting that they are going to be able to engage in the conversation at the level that's needed. All those kind of techniques are essential to be able to deliver bad news or difficult news. The one thing that gets scored the lowest on most of the CEO 360s that we do, like the lowest average score on all of the times we've done it, has been failing to fire mediocre performers soon enough. So it is a big challenge, and something that we all, because we want to be nice and liked human beings, it's a bit scary to have a conflict and has big consequences. We often shy away from not just that, the really challenging, horrible conversations, but some of the less difficult ones as well.
that's, it all comes around to different styles, I suppose, doesn't it? The way that you're going to be having those conversations and framing the conversation, or framing the way that you're actually putting forward your ideas. And everybody's going to have that different style, as you mentioned. There isn't let's say a one size fits all leadership style. And at the moment, not at the moment, but throughout history, there's always been cults of personality around strong leaders, around leaders that people seem to be successful. Let's look at the sort of tech moguls of today, the Elon Musks of the world. Is there anything around that you think that there are lessons to be learned, that there's ways of going about it to replicate other leaders that you see potentially in the news or in your particular industry?
I would certainly not say this is the model of leadership to follow, full stop. But I would always encourage leaders to choose one or a range of role models that just resonate with them and they personally aspire to emulate in some way. So that's the first thing to say. I think the other thing is a universally useful behavior is to deliberately open up to different styles that aren't necessarily your own, different styles, different opinions, and to force yourself to have more of a willingness to engage with people who exhibit those different styles, or even to try them out yourself to expand your repertoire. So great leaders are able not just to inspire followership from people that are like them or in a particular segment of the population, but actually to relate with a broader range of people. And that takes a bit more flexibility, a bit of a broader repertoire. One of my favorite exercises that we do on our programs is called Dimensions of Difference. And it's a very simple exercise where we have people identify how they feel most different from others in the cohort, in the leadership cohort that they're on a program with us in. We capture those dimensions of difference, and they can be all sorts of things, but the point is it's self-assessed, is right. So I feel different because, we had this hilarious one last week. He says I'm dragged from the gutter. So we had gutter dragged versus qualification junkie, right? All at these two ends of the spectrum. And people were saying, oh, this is how I feel different. And then we get people to line up where they relate on a scale from those two extremes, where they relate, and then we facilitate conversations to really understand what it's like to feel those elements of difference and how they play into the leadership styles that they see, that they observe. And that very simple exercise can be massively eye-opening and can mean people can go, oh right, well there's this whole way of thinking and being that I didn't really get because I put myself here on the scale. I've just had a great conversation with someone who put themselves there. And that access is difference as not just a kind of nice thing we kind of understand each other and include better, but actually a massive competitive advantage.
And I think coming from when you're talking about competitive advantage as well, it's probably quite a nice time to go to the other end of the scale. And you mentioned it at the start when you were talking about what you've done and how you've done it in the different areas. But we always like to have a little chat about sometimes the challenges or the failures that are going on, because it's so many lessons are learned throughout periods of intense pressure or intense failure. And can you expand on any time that you've
want to hear
gone
about
through
my most magnificent failure? Would you like to hear about that?
Please go on.
No, look, I'm totally cool about failure. I've had a lot of failure. I've also been lucky enough to have a lot of success, which has probably made it a bit easier to talk frankly about my failures. But I am not pretending. I'm definitely not dressing up failure as like, oh, well, it all worked out okay in the end, because sometimes it hasn't, right? So if I give you my best, my most spectacular and known about failure was that in 2012 I did a crowdfund. It was one of the first crowdfunds that was done, when Seeders and Crowdcube, etc., were setting out, and raised some money for a tech startup, which failed. I won't give you the whole story of why it failed. There's probably lots of reasons actually, but wasn't financially viable. I had to phone up 114 people and tell them I lost their money, and that was pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
So that was not great. That was one of my personal failures. That took me a while to come to terms with that, really. A lot of people were amazing, very supportive, quite surprised that I was so authentic. I suppose that's one thing I salvaged from it, that I did have the conversations and people were impressed with that, but ultimately still lost their money. Another example was actually where I was subjected to some quite horrible discrimination whilst I was working in the Middle East. It wasn't actually the Middle East, it was the British male team I was working with at the time. And actually, what's an interesting failure out of that situation was my own behaviour. I basically got really dysfunctional and defensive and stopped delivering the huge value that I could in that particular situation. Again, looking back, it's easy to say, oh, I could have done this, could have done that, but it's another failure. I could go on, but these kind of failures are what make us able to be whole, complete humans that are able to bring our best contribution to the world over and over again with a commitment that doesn't waver even when it doesn't go right every time.
It's resilience as well, isn't it? Building up that style of yourself. But that does impress me that you called everybody. You hear so many stories of just the rug being pulled out of a project and disappearing. So that's to be celebrated.
Oh, thank you. You're very generous.
But I think just as we come to a close, I think people are going to be wanting to hear what's next for you. How are you going to be going forwards? What projects, what plans have you got coming up?
Oh, well, I'm very excited for Horizon 37. So we've just had our 5-year birthday, which is a really exciting milestone, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've looked back on what we've done and the transformation that we've managed to achieve in some fantastic innovation businesses that we're very proud of. Thinking about where we're heading next 5 years. So this is a great time to ask the question, actually. We have a vision to expand into innovation ecosystems around the world to bring the programs and the support that we are currently delivering primarily in Oxford, Cambridge, London, and increasingly the north of England to bring to other innovation cities around the world. And I'm really looking forward to that. I must in my own career have coached 2,000 leaders. I've certainly clocked up my 10,000 hours. And now it's for me very much focused on building a business full of leaders ourselves, to have other coach leaders to bring the Horizon 37 impact and scale that beyond where we are now.
So quite a lot going on, and hopefully we'll the next 5 years will bring as much success as the last. So that sounds absolutely fantastic. It's always nice when people are still positive and raring to go as well. It's not just sort of same old, which sometimes does happen. But Katy, if people wanted to connect with you, if they wanted to find out more about Horizon 37, where would they be going? What would Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, websites?
Website. So the website is Horizon37. That's horizon37.co.uk. And we are also on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to interact with us, on Horizon 37.
Thank you. And, I hope anybody out there listening will get in touch and find out a little bit more about what you do. But Katy, thank you ever so much for coming on. That was a fantastic conversation.
I really enjoyed it. And I do hope that a lot of the things we've discussed will give people things to think about, to create their own versions of leadership, building on the ideas that we've just generated now.
Brilliant. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.